Hey, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to the Hanging On to Hope podcast.
I'm Brenda J.
And I'm Karen Wonder.
And we are hangingontohope.org.
This podcast is intended as educational and is not psychological or medical advice. Always consult a professional when needed, and we disclaim any liability in connection with the instruction, information, or advice given.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Hanging On to Hope podcast. This is Brenda J. Today, we're honored to welcome back Carissa Raderstorf to the show. Carissa is an ordained minister, board-certified pastoral counselor, and oversees the Reset retreats. Reset Together and personalized coaching and intensives through Reset Ministries. She's passionate about helping people experience emotional healing, relational growth, and deeper connection with God. Carissa holds an MAE from Olivet Nazarene University and graduate certificates in counseling and executive coaching and consulting from the Townsend Institute at CUI.
So we're so excited to have you back, Carissa. Welcome back to the podcast.
Yay!
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So today we're talking about something that sounds simple, but can actually be incredibly difficult, being present with people in pain. Your podcast, Being Present, really spoke to us because so many people want to help others during hard seasons, but they don't always know what to say or do. You give an example of a memorable experience when you were in high school. Do you want to expound?
Sure. Yeah, I kind of had to go through the archives to remember this. Because I turned 50 this year, which is crazy. So it was when I was 16 years old. And the fact that I even remember it really says a lot. When two weeks before my 16th birthday, one of my best friends was shot and killed. And I grew up in Iowa, and that would be traumatizing anywhere, but those things just didn't happen where I was from. And I was hurting. It was the first time dealing with grief. But I remember that fall, I played volleyball and basketball, and volleyball was first. And so we were going to all the gyms where we would go in our basketball season. My friend that passed away, I played basketball with. So I was going back to these gyms, and it was just memorable to be there and think of her and all these memories that we had. But I remember one of my volleyball teammates who wasn't really friends with her. I was standing with her during warm-ups, and I was just looking up at the banners in the gym. And I just remember saying to her, I remember in every gym, I have a memory with Tara. And she did something so wise for a 16-year-old to do. She just said, we'll share a memory from each gym. And so I just started telling stories about my friend. And I didn't have the words for it then, but she gave me the gift of being present. Mm-hmm. She didn't say you need to be over this by now. She didn't try to cheerlead me. She didn't give advice. She just let me talk, and she listened. And the fact that I still remember that and how it made me feel means that she gave me a gift that day in the middle of my grief.
Mm. Yeah, it is a gift. Because you're right. Most people don't want advice or anything. They just want to be heard.
Especially when they're 16.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one thing you shared is that when people go through difficult times, how we show up especially matters. Why do you think so many people struggle with simply being present with someone who's hurting?
I think a lot of people struggle being present because pain makes us feel powerless. Mm-hmm. So sitting with someone else's pain, it makes us face our own discomfort. So when we see tears, that can feel scary, or silence can feel awkward for sure. And so sometimes when people are processing grief, it can stir up our own grief. And the temptation is that I feel like I need to say the right thing or offer the right advice or make the person feel better. But most of the healing is simply saying something like, I'm here, I'm not leaving, or like my friend did, just share more, say more. So not fixing, but just literally being present. And so the message is, I can't fix this, but I can stay with you in it.
Yeah, this podcast was so important to me because the first time that I really learned this was through Karen. And one time we were downstairs and she was going through a difficult time, and I was trying to figure out how I could fix it. Mm-hmm. And she's like, I don't want you to fix anything. I don't need you to do anything. I just need you to be here.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand it. I didn't know what she meant because I was so used to fixing everything. Mm-hmm. So I learned so much from that. And so that's why I feel like every listener can learn a lot from this, just being there for somebody.
And it really is easy as far as, advice, like, well, we got to come up with something smart, or what's a 3-step plan? But being present is low volume of words. It's just listening, and it's just saying, I'm here with you in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Which is really what they need.
Right. Yeah, it's actually easier than trying to come up with the advice or the wisdom to give them, just listening to them. But sometimes that is harder if you're not used to it. Yeah, but
it's
a lot of us,
yeah,
totally. So a lot of us feel pressure to fix things, like Brenda was saying, give advice or say the perfect spiritual answer. One of the worst things you can say is, you know what you should do? Have you tried this? You say this actually causes more dysregulation. Do you want to add to that? Why is presence often more healing than words?
So when we start to offer advice, it can make us feel more dysregulated, because it can make a hurting person feel like they now have to manage our response when they're already overwhelmed.
Yeah.
So our nervous system is so dysregulated when we're suffering or we're traumatized or we're in grief, and it's already working hard. So when we jump in with things like, well, you know what you should do, or have you tried this? It can land like it's pressure, even if it means well. What it's communicating is, your pain's a problem that I have to solve. When we really need to just communicate, you're not alone in this, because now I've got to think about what you're saying and think about options, and I'm already too overwhelmed to think logically. So presence first, and then later we could talk about options or ways out or solutions, but somebody has to be regulated. And we make the mistake of thinking that one conversation is going to fix somebody's pain or problem.
Yeah. Right. Or just the right answer. Well, and it's usually never that simple.
So you mentioned that these moments are not necessarily times for wisdom or solutions. What do people truly need when they're walking through grief, trauma, disappointment, or loss?
Several things. I think one of the biggest ones is to be witnessed. I like the phrase of witness, especially as believers, which means to be with you in the middle of it. We want to be seen. I love in the Old Testament the story of Hagar. I mean, I don't love her story because it's a traumatic story, but I love the part where God chases after her when Abram sends her away. And it's kind of fascinating that the first person that names God in the Bible is an immigrant, traumatized, really sexually exploited woman. And she names God, and what she names him is the God who sees. It's beautiful because God sees her pain when nobody else sees her. So when we're suffering, we need to be witnessed. We need someone to really see us, really see what we're going through. And then another important thing is we need to be believed. Especially in trauma, the person typically is already questioning themselves because their reality has been so skewed. So just saying, I believe in you can be really, really, or I believe you. I believe your story. I believe what you're saying. That's validating, and it can be really regulating. And then also is just to feel less alone. It's such a boulder that we're carrying when we're in the middle of suffering. And it just helps when someone else is with us in the middle of it, not trying to fix, not trying to solve, but just saying, here, I'm with you. I see that this is hard. And then giving them permission to feel, not be told to calm down or move on or be strong or try to make meaning of what's happening. Just give them space to cry, be confused, whatever emotions come up, and not telling them how they need to feel yet. And so in a word, what they need is safety, emotional safety in the midst of what they're experiencing.
Yeah, I think a lot of us, like I wasn't taught any of this growing up in my family. We were a very unemotional family. So if we express any emotion at all, that then something was, we weren't okay. It just wasn't accepted. It wasn't understood that you need to process grief and process painful situations. You just ignored them. So I think a lot of people can probably relate to that as well and know that we need to just be there. Like I said, I didn't learn it until last 2 years ago with Karen. I didn't.
I think most people are in that boat. We do a lot of groups with Reset, and one of the sessions that we do in our Reset Together program is all about grief and the role of lament. And we do an inventory where we go through major losses in our life. And we talk about how we typically have respond to times of grief, which usually is a learned response from our family. And I don't think anyone ever, their learned response has been the healthy way. To bring it to God and to bring it into relationships, which is the way that we process grief in a healthy way. And so you're not alone, Brenda. It's just most people don't know this. They don't do it in a healthy way.
Yeah, that's good. That's why we're doing this podcast, because it is so important.
Yeah, it's interesting you're talking about that, because we were kind of joking about menopause. But for me, I've been thinking lately that I want to get a group of women together, because to me, it's really something I'm struggling with, especially at work, because I work with, my job is so mentally fatiguing. I was scrolling through Instagram one day, and this gal that she's like a menopause coach, but she talked about the brain fog in the afternoon, especially. And I almost started crying just reading her things. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's, and I wrote this comment, and this other gal commented back. And it's just something, it's like you said, you feel so alone in it, because I can't really talk to my husband about that, because he doesn't really understand what that's like. You almost really need to talk to someone that knows what that is like, because it's like a panicky feeling, like I can't do my job, like I can't do this. And so, I think what you're saying really
it feels
resonates.
validating when someone else basically says me too, and they're identifying what you're saying.
Yeah. So there's a lot of truth in that. So you say that you personally struggled on your end with inviting someone into that hard space and entering into the pain with you. Do you want to expound on that at all?
Yeah, I think part of that is personality. Part of that is what we're talking about just now, just learned, vulnerability wasn't real popular in my family. Telling jokes and being sarcastic was, but that doesn't really set up. Yeah, it doesn't really set up an environment for being vulnerable, because if you feel like nothing is off limits for jokes, then being vulnerable is not going to really be very inviting. But then also, I think just being in ministry and sitting across from people a lot that are sharing hard things, I think I fell into the trap of thinking, because I allow other people to be vulnerable, that I was vulnerable. That's really what I thought. Like, oh, I'm a really vulnerable person because I share all these vulnerable spaces with people. But then I went several years ago, I was in a process group, actually when I was doing some of this training with the Townsend Institute, and we did a series of 8 groups, and I think maybe 6 groups in, the facilitator said, well, who hasn't really shared yet? And everyone points at me. And I thought, well, I've just been giving space to everybody else. But we came to this point in the process where we give feedback, and they gently said, you give space for us, but you haven't really shared. And it was a light bulb moment for me of vulnerability goes both ways. Like it's actually not vulnerable. When I allow you to be vulnerable, that's you being vulnerable. But vulnerability on my end is I share my mistakes, my failures, my pain. And the best connections are when it's mutual. And, we don't know what we don't know. And then the light shines on. I'm like, wow, I guess I'm not vulnerable.
That is so interesting. I never thought about that. Because I'm always in spaces, and probably Karen too, with the women we talk to, where we allow them to be vulnerable, but I never thought about that.
Yeah. Well, it opened the doorway for so much healing for me. A lot of the reason I wasn't vulnerable also was because I minimized my pain. I would hear other stories like, oh, that's so much worse than mine, so I'm not going to bring mine up. But their naming that invited me into sharing the pain that I was holding. And it was a doorway to so much freedom and healing for me, because they were present with me and let me share too.
Yeah. And I almost thought, well, it's about them, so I don't want to start sharing too much of my stuff, because this is about helping them. So I always had that mindset, but now I see that it's actually a stronger connection if it's mutual.
Yeah. And you're bringing up a good point there, because in the moment, I don't want to hijack and make it about me. So if someone is sharing something that's really dysregulating and something really painful, sometimes I will tap into something in me that connects with that. It'll remind me of a story. And, it's best to just keep that really short, maybe 30 seconds. Like, hey, I remember a time when, and just kind of name it real briefly and then bounce it back. Like, hey, I know what that was like for me.
Yeah.
But keep sharing what that's like for you. Because in the moment, if we hijack the conversation, they're not going to hear anything that we're saying. because they're not grounded enough. Later, we need to be vulnerable and tell our story.
Yeah, that's good. God, I guess, does give you wisdom the more you pray, because I realized that as I would be listening to someone, just throw in a little bit and then don't give too much because this is about them. So that's really, really good.
And we tend to compare, like you said, our pain against someone else's pain. And sometimes things said can do that too. So it's being.
Yeah, that's so good. So your husband, Jeff, mentions how we learn to become as self-reliant as possible. And your guest on the show mentions that the challenge is you're not building the ties that you need when you really do need someone to be present. You're not taking advantage of the downtime to build those ties and truly building trusting relationships. We get into the habit of pulling away. Why is it important to push ourselves to do this? And where do we start?
Yeah, I think what we were sharing in that podcast is we shouldn't wait until something really horrible happens. And then, now I need someone to be present, but I haven't built up the relationship along the way of allowing others into that space or being vulnerable, as we've been talking about. And so finding friendships and relationships to build up that muscle so that if and when something happens, because it always does in life, that we've built up that skill to be present. And it's really important because, another reason is people remember less of what we said and more of how they felt with us. So when we push ourselves to stay present, we are practicing love does not need to control the outcome. So.
I like that. I love it.
No, I thought it was good.
Yeah. And I think that part of the podcast was just saying it's hard to expect somebody to be there and present for you if you never built any of those relationships during the times that things weren't hard for you. Mm-hmm. And then you just expect people to be there. That's what I took it as. And that makes so much sense. It's like really put the effort in because it's hard work on those relationships in your in-between time. That way it'll just kind of naturally flow when somebody needs you to be there.
Yeah.
So you say sometimes people unintentionally make someone feel more alone by minimizing their pain or rushing them through it. Some people will even use the Bible or scripture and make you feel worse. What are some things we should avoid saying when someone is suffering?
There's so many things we should avoid saying. I love there's a video by Brenda Brown, and it's about getting in the well. Like you fall down in the well and it's dark, and one person's standing at the top telling us to get out, but someone else crawls down in there and sits with us. But she uses this phrase and she says, an empathetic response never starts with at least. Mm-hmm. So at least it wasn't worse, or through a divorce, at least you still have your friends. Well, I mean, that's minimizing the loss that we're actually carrying. Mm. And so it should never start with at least, because what we're doing is just trying to skew things to the positive. So it's not a space where we need to be cheerleaded out of. Another phrase that doesn't help is everything happens for a reason. That makes people feel like they're supposed to quickly make sense of something that's devastating. Mm. So the most faithful response, not an explanation, but to lament with people. But again, if we don't have a comfort level with grief and lament, it's going to be really hard to sit in that space. Another phrase that's not helpful that a lot of times Christians say is, God won't give you more than you can handle, which is an absolute lie. I can't tell you how many times in my life I've had more than I can handle. And my nervous system is telling me that because I'm shutting down and I'm dysregulating and I'm in fight or flight.
Yeah.
But it's always more than I can handle if I don't invite people into that space. Mm. God into that space, people into that space. And a lot of times Christians, what we can do that keeps us stuck is we want to just keep it between us and God. He's the ultimate and safe person. But God has designed us to bring it into relationship. And we see Jesus doing this in Gethsemane, different stories in the Bible with him and with the Apostle Paul. Like they're weeping before Paul is leaving. Jesus is inviting them in Gethsemane. He's praying to God, the vertical piece, but he's inviting them, come pray with me. He's not afraid of lament. Even in the Sermon on the Mount, some of the Beatitudes are that he comforts those who mourn. But that means that we have to actually mourn, express our grief so that we can be comforted. And so God has wired us to bring people into those hard spaces. So some of the other sayings that aren't real helpful is I know exactly how you feel.
Yeah.
Even if we've been through something similar, we do not know exactly what it's like for them. You should be over this by now. Obviously, that is not helpful, but pain doesn't follow a timeline.
Right.
So we need to give people the space to grieve the way that they grieve. Or have you tried? We've kind of gotten into this with advice, or it could be worse. Or the worst is if someone passes away and well, God just needed another angel. It's just not helpful.
Mm-hmm.
No. It made me think, I think I do that though. I'll try to silver lining everything. Because in my mind, I have to go the positive direction, or I could go the other direction way too far. So is there a balance there? I mean, or I just haven't learned how to probably lament in a way that's healthy.
I think what is helpful is attuning to the person. So attunement, it's kind of like that pitching fork that they use in music, that it creates like a certain frequency that we try to match with an instrument or with our voice.
Mm-hmm.
So attuning emotionally is I'm tuning in to what you're feeling, like that place in me that feels the sadness or feels frustrated or overwhelmed the way that you're expressing. But I'm also tuning in to your eyes and the sound of your voice and the volume of your voice, or you were all excited and now you're not really talking, body language. So as I'm attuning, I can get a feel for like, does she need to keep talking about this? Do I need to be comfortable with silence? And if I start trying to cheerlead or give encouragement, if we're attuning well, we can tell this isn't hitting the mark.
That's so good. That's such a good answer. I really like that.
There's a podcast I listen to called, she actually calls it Everything Happens, but she has a book that just came out. I got it for my sister, but she went through cancer. I mean, she thought she was going to die from cancer. She got terminal illness, but her book and her podcast talks a lot about like what you're saying too, about a lot of those verses don't even mean what they're exactly saying. And that's not what you want to hear when you're in the midst of, dying of cancer. You don't want to hear something like that. That's not comforting to you.
No.
So.
I had a friend she was in her late 20s, pregnant with her first child, and her husband got diagnosed and died of cancer within like 2 months. And it was just awful. And I remember we were all in my apartment and there was an older lady there, and my friend is in deep grief, and the lady meant well. But she started talking about when her husband passed away, and he was about 70, still sad, but he started launching into this long story. And I didn't have the words for it then, but I was just watching my friend. Like I was so glued into my friend. And I remembered thinking, this isn't helping.
Right.
Please stop telling this story. But that I was experiencing attunement without knowing what it was, because I was so attuned to my friend. But the other lady, meaning well, wasn't. And so when we attune well, we can really get a sense of what we're doing is helping.
That's good.
I think that happens a lot with like terminal illnesses, even with pregnancy. I can remember like you're worried about pregnancy and people telling you all these stories about their pregnancy and you're like, this isn't helping, if you're like worried about it or something.
Right.
Yeah. So for survivors of abuse or trauma, especially, feeling emotionally safe can be really difficult. What does healthy, compassionate presence look like for someone who's been deeply wounded?
I think it looks like safety without pressure. So being present is not forceful or demanding, and we don't want to rush people through things like forgiveness or grief or make them over-explain details or turn their pain into a lesson. So when we are really present in a way that's helpful, we move slowly and we honor the person's pace. So it can look like being steady and not being shocked. So if someone's sharing something that is really shocking to us, what we don't want them to have to do is try to manage our emotions on top of their own emotions. Believing them. I mentioned earlier, for many survivors, being believed is profoundly healing because they haven't been believed before. Validating pain is huge. Nothing's worse than when we're sharing something traumatic and someone's minimizing the way that we feel. Respecting boundaries. So we can't demand vulnerability. We don't even want to touch, hug, pray, or share their story without their permission. And that kind of connects with giving choice and control back, because trauma involves powerlessness. So when we have a compassionate presence, we say things like, would it help to talk, or would you rather just sit for a minute? That's giving them power to make decisions and take control. Or do you want advice, or you just want to listen? Or is it okay if I pray for you? Because giving choice helps restore dignity that's been lost in the midst of the trauma. And then just staying consistent part of their life without being pushy and not spiritualizing the pain too soon.
That's so good. I'm learning so much. I love this.
So as an introvert, you would think I would want to be isolated, but introverts need support too. And you kind of already talked about this. How do we sit with someone in the hard without trying to control their healing process or timeline?
Yeah, so introverts, they might need more quiet space or time to process. My husband's an introvert, so I've had to grow in this. Introverts need to internalize and process stuff more, but it definitely doesn't mean that they need to be alone in their pain. God hasn't designed any of us that way. So sometimes we can assume with an introvert that they don't want to talk, so I'm just going to leave them alone, but they need that support. So we just need to offer it gently and without pressure. And what we never want to do with anybody is to take ownership of their healing or decide what healing should look like for somebody else. When we have healthy presence, it communicates, I'm here, but I'm not going to be pushy. I'm going to check in, but I'm not going to demand a response. I'm going to honor your space and your process, but I'm not going to disappear.
That's good. As an introvert, I say that's good advice.
Yeah. And I wanted to make sure we added that question because a lot of people, I think, well, they're an introvert. They just want me to leave them alone. And that's just so not true. That's why I really like that part of the podcast.
Yeah.
So you talk a lot about emotional healing and relational growth through Reset Ministries. How does learning to be present with others also help us to grow emotionally and spiritually ourselves?
I think it's
To be continued. Stay tuned for next week's part 2. You don't want to miss it.
Thanks for tuning in to Hanging On to Hope. Check out our website, hangingontohope.org. There are resources on there, and if you would like to donate or volunteer, you can do that through our website. We are a brand new nonprofit, so we appreciate any and all support. And we thank you for listening, and until next time, keep hanging on to hope. We are evidence that there is hope and healing for you, and our passion is to help you find it too. So thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for listening, everyone.